Have you ever looked at the wreckage of a good life and asked the one question that feels like a betrayal to even utter? Why? We are taught from childhood that if you play by the rules, you win. If you are kind, you are rewarded. We crave a world that makes sense, a cosmic vending machine where we insert righteousness and receive blessing. But then, the storm hits. Suddenly, the math doesn't add up. Life is undeniably, brutally unfair. Tonight, we are sitting in the ashes with a man who knew this silence better than anyone. We're exploring the book of Job, not as a dusty Sunday school lesson, but as a roadmap for anyone who feels like God has forgotten the rules of fairness. Life is unfair, but God is fair. Understanding the difference between those two things will change the way you breathe. Let's look at Job. He wasn't just good, the Bible describes him as blameless. He had 7 sons, 3 daughters, and thousands of livestock. He was proactive in his faith, living in what we call a hedge of protection. But in the celestial realm, the accuser argues that Job's faith is bought and paid for. Take away his stuff, he says, and he will curse you. This sets the stage. Is our worship a transaction, or is it a relationship? Consider Eunice. She left a toxic job by faith, expecting God to open doors immediately. Instead, she faced 6 months of silence. When an offer finally came, it was rescinded hours later. She sat on her floor and asked, "Why did you give me hope just to take it away?" Eunice realized that her hedge was her own expectation. In the silence, she learned that God wasn't providing a job, He was providing Himself. Eventually, a traineeship opened that perfectly aligned with her calling. The fairness wasn't in the timing, it was in the transformation. Reflect on the hedge of health. We often think our physical safety is a reward for our faith. I knew a young mother named Clara who ate organically, ran marathons, and prayed daily. When she was diagnosed with an aggressive illness, her fairness world collapsed. She spent months angry at the hedge that failed her. But in the middle of her treatment, she began to notice others in the waiting room who had no hope. She realized that God hadn't removed the hedge to punish her, but to place her in a field where she could be a light to those in the darkest shadows. In a single day, Job loses everything: wealth, servants, and all 10 children. Shortly after, his health is struck. He sits in a pile of ash, scraping his skin with pottery. His friends arrive, and they represent the fairness doctrine. They tell him, "You must have sinned. God is just, therefore you must be guilty." We see this struggle in Daniel Ritchie, Born Without Arms. Like Job, he faced a world that looked at him and saw a mistake. People's theological explanations for his disability were often as cruel as Job's friends. But in the ash pile of his limitations, Daniel found that his worth wasn't in what he could do, but in whose he was. Then there is the story of a man named Thomas. Thomas spent 40 years as a faithful accountant for a nonprofit. He was 2 years from retirement when he was framed for a financial discrepancy he didn't commit. He lost his pension and his reputation. Like Job, he sat in the ashes of a destroyed name. He spent 3 years fighting in court, feeling the stinging unfairness of a lie. But during those 3 years, he started a small Bible study for men in legal trouble. He found a ministry he would have never sought in his comfort. He learned that while the court system was unfair, God was using the injustice to position him for an eternal impact. Think also of the woman who, at 40, lost her home and family to addiction. She slept behind a dumpster, feeling the curse God and die wait every day. But like Job, she cried out from the bottom. Today, she helps others break free. She didn't get her original years back, but she was restored to a version of herself purified by fire. Consider the unfairness of grief. When we lose someone we love too early, we scream at the sky. A friend of mine lost her husband to a sudden heart attack on their 20th anniversary. It felt like a cosmic joke. She felt the silence of God for 2 years. But in that silence, she discovered a God who doesn't just fix things, but a God who weeps with us. She realized that fairness isn't about the length of a life, but the depth of the love shared within it. After chapters of silence, God speaks from a whirlwind. He asks Job, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth?" He takes Job on a tour of the cosmos, the constellations, and the wild strength of the Leviathan. The turning point is when Job realizes, "I cannot see the whole picture, but I can see the one who draws it." Take Neil, a provider who lost his job during an economic crash. 18 months of scraping the pottery of his bank account. Neil's whirlwind moment came when he realized God's timetable is a compass, not a clock. He learned that God is never late, but he is rarely early. On the very day they considered asking for emergency aid, a recruiter called. Think of a scientist I know, someone who spent her life looking through microscopes. She struggled with the why of natural disasters. Her whirlwind moment came when she realized the staggering complexity of the ecosystem. She saw that even destructive forces like forest fires lead to new growth that can't happen any other way. She realized that our definition of fairness is often just a lack of data. God's fairness is the management of a billion interconnected lives across a billion years. Reflect on the unfairness of success. Sometimes we see the wicked prosper and we feel the sting. A young entrepreneur watched his dishonest competitor get the multi-million-dollar contract while he stayed small but honest. He felt like a fool. But 3 years later, the competitor was in prison for fraud, and the honest man had a business built on a foundation of granite. He realized that God's fairness is often a slow cooker, not a microwave. The triumph of Job isn't just the return of his wealth. Job says, "I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you." I think of a couple whose marriage was crumbling. A job offer was rescinded due to an unfair lie. They were devastated. However, because that door slammed shut, her current boss offered her a promotion near her husband. If the unfair thing hadn't happened, she would have settled for less. God used an act of unfairness to position her for a double blessing. Consider the triumph of the scar. We want our lives to be perfectly smooth. But a master carpenter once told me that the most beautiful wood is the wood with the most knots and burls, the wood that has survived the most stress. Job's restoration didn't erase his history, it gave his history a new meaning. Lastly, reflect on the unfairness of grace. We want fairness for our enemies, but we want mercy for ourselves. The ultimate unfair act was the cross, where a perfect man took the punishment for an imperfect world. When we realize that we don't actually want fairness from God, because fairness would mean we get what our sins deserve, we begin to cherish His fairness, which is actually a commitment to our ultimate restoration. If you are in your ash pile season, your pain is not proof of God's absence. Life is unfair because we live in a broken world. But God is fair because He is the ultimate restorer. He is the one who sits in the ashes with you. Hold on. Your story doesn't end in chapter 1. There is a chapter 42 coming. Thank you for spending this hour with me. If this reflection brought you peace, please like this video and share it with someone walking through a storm. And don't forget to subscribe so we can continue exploring these truths together. I'm Jessica. Rest in the truth that He is with you. I'll see you in the next one.